I haven't seen a ton of great videos on rebuilding SU HIF 4 carburetors. These are off of a 1972 MGB, so I'm going to give it a shot here. First things first, you want the proper tools, and sometimes you got to make the proper tools. So I had a buddy of mine make this little gem for me. It's got slotted holes that approximately line up with the holes that would mount your air cleaners, and it allows you to pull the whole assembly off the car at once. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep you from dropping all kinds of screws and stuff down to the floor into your engine bay, and it allows you to just disassemble the whole thing in one controlled method. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing bolted up to here. We're going to pull the carbs off with the linkages intact, so we'll just separate the throttle cable there and the choke cable, and we'll get them up on the bench and we'll pull them apart there. The thing I want to mention is the contact points that you have to take apart before you pull the carbs off of the engine. Obviously, you're going to have your fuel line here. I just stuck a bolt in mine and left it over here to the side. This would be the vent tube, and on mine it went to the piece that connects the two sides and would go off to the charcoal canister if I had one installed. This here on both carburetors is the crankcase ventilation tube. So from here and from this one on the other side, that goes to the hose, which would go to a Y fitting in here down to the side cover on the engine. So you pull those off. I'm going to end up replacing those with a fresh new rubber hose, so that's why I just went ahead and pulled everything off. Your throttle cable here is literally just that cotter pin that you pull, and then it slides out of the linkage right there, and you can just leave the cable hanging. Choke cable, mine has this little set screw that I had to do because it's stripped out, and so choke cable comes out, just lays wherever. Then the last two things that I got to worry about before I can hook up my little device and pull the carburetors off. Down here on the bottom, you definitely want to take out the choke return and throttle return spring. Otherwise, you're going to pull the carburetors off, and they won't want to come for you, and they will. You'll be stretching the springs. So now I'm going to get the springs undone, get the little tool I showed you earlier set up, and we'll pull the carbs off onto the bench. With my little bracket attached, there's just the 4 screws that hold the carburetors on to undo, or the 4 nuts there. Get ready to be here a while, because the one on the bottom side of each carburetor is pretty much one of those barely a quarter of a turn at a time things, and you can't get a ratchet on it, you can't get anything but a box end wrench on it, and it's gonna take a bit to get it off. Okay, we got the carburetors on the bench now. I recommend getting some kind of a metal cake pan or cookie sheet or something that you can put them on, so you don't just get parts and gas and everything all over the place. The one thing that you can do to kind of help to eliminate a little bit of the chance of mess is after I pulled these off, I tipped them up over my gas can and drained what I could of the fuel out of the vent there on the left and the fill on the right, and then I came over and did the same thing for the vent on the right hand or the rear carburetor. And what that is going to do is it's going to try and get as much fuel out of these float bowls as possible, and when you go to take them apart, hopefully you're not just pouring 2 carburetors worth of fuel all over your bench or into filling the pan or whatever. The next step is going to be to take lots of pictures. I'm going to take as many pictures as I can of the linkage. I'm honestly going to use this video probably to go back and see how it was put together. I'm going to take pictures from the front, from the back, from all different angles, because when I go to reassemble this, I don't want to be guessing once I get it back on the car how the linkage is supposed to go, and chance something being uneven or something being misaligned or misadjusted because I you know, didn't pay enough attention when I was taking this stuff apart. So take your time, take plenty of pictures of the linkages and whatnot for reference for later when you're putting everything back together again. So after, and only after, you've taken all the pictures you can possibly hope to take of the linkages, in my case, we're gonna undo these 4 bolts and pull my tool off and separate the carburetors so we can take care of them one at a time. The nice thing about working on these carburetors is that the bolts that you're going to come into contact with all use a 1/2-inch wrench, so you're not trying to hunt around for the right one. So the ones, the nuts on the back that connected them to the engine, or to the intake manifold actually, and the ones that hold everything on from the outside, whether it be air cleaners or I use these velocity stacks, they all use the same 1/2-inch wrench to take everything apart. So I'm going to pull this bracket off. I'm going to separate the 2 carburetors, take off this the fuel hose that links the 2, and then we'll deal with the carburetors one at a time. Okay, we're going to try switching over to the GoPro here. I'll check the audio later, and if I need to make adjustments or do the other carb a different way, we'll make that happen. So I'm going to take one carburetor for now and just kind of set it aside. You can see here the linkage is actually, you can kind of self-contain the linkage if you keep everything on the side of the carbs the way it should be. So we're also going to set the linkage aside. I went and bought the Ultrasonic Cleaner from Harbor Freight, and I'm going to soak everything in something. The rusty parts will get soaked in a little bit different than the carbs for the grease and oil and whatnot. So taking the one carb, the easiest way to do this is to start with the top up here and the dash pot and everything up top. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to undo these 3 flat screws that hold the dash pot on. You will need to pull the dash pot out. It doesn't really matter when you do it. Another important thing to remember is that you're going to be cleaning this stuff, so all of your dash pot oil will be gone. You're going to have to put oil back in the dash pot for it to dampen properly. So that pulls out. Once you actually undo all the screws, that comes off. Keep track of the spring, and don't forget to put it back in, because I have done that before. And your needle there, your main needle, and the piston. What this is going to allow you to do is when you go to take the bottom half of the carb apart, you can just flip it upside down and have free range to work there. Alright, so I spun the camera around because I feel like you guys didn't want to watch my shaky head cam. We'll see if I've got to flip the video or keep it the same way so you guys can follow along. So, 2 things to remember, because I forgot them. 1, there will be dash pot oil in there. Dump it out, otherwise it will go all over the place when you inevitably don't pay attention and turn this thing around to look at it. 2, no matter how much fuel you drain out of the carburetors, there will be fuel in the bowls. So after you've taken them apart, I would say it's a good idea to go ahead and drain it out of the tubes again. And that is also why we have this pan here, because there's going to be fuel left over, and you're going to have to deal with it. It's going to pour all over the place. Have fun. So where we left off was we pulled the dash pot off of here, pulled the piston out. So you could move on to the linkage next. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and flip this carburetor body over and take off the screws that are on the bottom here. Mine are flatheads. I'm assuming that they're all flatheads, but you gotta love previous owners and the wonderful modifications they make to their vehicles and to their carburetors for who knows what reason. So we're going to go ahead and take all these out. Now, I have been inside both of my carburetors several times because of float needle issues and whatnot, and I have only ever replaced this bottom seal one time, but if you've got the rebuild kit, it comes with the bottom seal, so you're golden. So that's going to come off, and I'll give you a little bit of an anatomy lesson in here. So this is called the Bimetallic thermal compensator. Essentially, it's a bunch of pieces of metal sandwiched together that as your vehicle warms up or cools down, it will move up and down ever so slightly to adjust the height of your main jet. It's not much movement, and it's not something you need to tune around necessarily, but it's a feature that's there and should be semi-functional. This right here is the pivot screw for your mixture screw on the side. So it does not have a normal washer. It has the shoulder and the spring washer to put some pressure on here, and as you turn and adjust this screw in the side, it will lift or lower the main jet. So on the, oh look, more fuel that I didn't drain out. So on this top side, you'll see that main jet. It'll move up and down slightly. There's settings that you can look at for how high that should be as a default value. I'm pretty sure that any carburetor rebuild kit you buy from any reputable source is going to come with instructions on where to adjust your mixture screw to get this in kind of the middle of the operating range in order to you know, have a good starting place. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and pull off the pivot screw for this mixture thing, and that will actually allow you to pull everything out all at once. You can kind of thread this off of the main jet if you want, but and the carburetor rebuild kits come with new main jets, obviously, so you're not going to reuse that necessarily, unless you're just kind of doing a clean and put it back together again, which if you make sure you clean that out with carb cleaner or compressed air, you know, you might be able to get away with. So here you can see a little bit better. There is a shoulder on that. You cannot screw it the whole way in, and that spring presses up against this to allow it to pivot. Weird thing, and this is where I kind of ran into an issue. If you look in there, you can see the screw tip, and I'm trying to get some light on it there. You can see the screw tip that is your mixture screw on the side here. It only pushes, it doesn't pull. It solely relies on the spring on this screw. It solely relies on the spring and the screw to push the thing back into place. So as you're adjusting, you can screw this in, which is righty-richy. So you can screw it in, make it more rich, and it will go rich till it's blue in the face. When you go to back it out, if your carburetor is gummed up, if it's not in good condition, if, like mine used to, if the main jet is at all stuck in here, so it's not free moving in the pilot there, it will not lean itself back out again if any of those things are out of whack. So it's important to remember that you need to make sure that this is free moving in the center bore here, and that spring is in good condition. It's not broken on that shoulder bolt, because otherwise you'll be able to make your carb rich as much as you want. You will never be able to lean it back out again. So just one thing to notice. The way the float comes out, the float again has adjustments. We'll go over that on reassembly. But the way the float comes out is there's a screw over here on the side. So much better than a roll pin or a press pin. This is like, out of all the carburetors I've taken apart, this is by far the easiest to put back together again, even if you're doing it, like I have, upside down underneath the carburetor while it's still on the vehicle in order to mess with the float needle. Yes, it happens. So that screw comes out. It's literally a pin with a screw head on the end of it, and that frees up the float. So the float comes out. Most rebuild kits will not come with new floats, so make sure that yours doesn't have any fuel sloshing around in it. Make sure that it is in good condition, and like I said, we will go over setting float height and how you kind of adjust the tab to do that when we do the carb reassembly. So here we've got the float needle. This is what stops excess fuel from just pouring into the carburetor and then out the vent tubes. Like I said, I've been inside my carburetors before, so I've already replaced these. These have what's called a Viton tip on them. It's some, high durability rubber on a brass float. Way, way, way better than the plastic needle. If you have a plastic needle in your carburetor, throw it in the trash immediately. It will change sizes with the fuel, especially if you're not running ethanol free and whatever additives you need. But you need to make sure that that you get these in your rebuild kit, or if you're just doing a take apart and put it back together again with a clean, make sure you upgrade to the brass or whatever it is with the Viton tip. It'll save you so many headaches. Ask me how I know. Alright, so we're going to pause here. I need some tools to get the rest of this stuff taken apart. So I'm going to grab the proper sizes and we'll convene back in a bit. Alright, grab some extra tools here. Before I keep going inside here, I am going to pull out the mixture screw. Pull it completely out. There is a seal in here that you need to replace. If your carburetor has it. If somebody's been in here before, like mine, and has monkeyed with your mixture screw, your seal may be completely gone. My front carburetor was leaking out of the mixture screw because that seal had either perished or was removed by a previous owner. So that's backed all the way out now. I'll get it out later. I just needed it out of the way so I didn't damage the tip of it, because it's very tiny on the tip. So just the tip. So the two sizes that you're going to need here, 5/16 for the float, the needle seat, and that just pops out. Mine are nice and shiny and new because I just replaced them to fix a different issue with the carburetor, but we're doing the full rebuild anyway, and the kit will come with them. So the other one is 5/8. So get that started with the 5/8, and you can pull the collar for the main jet off of there. And this moves freely in here. I'm not sure if it comes out or not, but you want to definitely get this as disassembled as possible in order to get everything as clean as it needs to be. Alright, we're back. I figured out a good way to get one of these right angle picks, and that's a great way to just reach in here and pop your mixture screw out. There's the seal that I was talking about, which you definitely are going to want to get in there with a pick, pull the old one out, and put a new one on, or like mine, your carburetors will leak out of your mixture screw. So pull the mixture screw out. You're going to want to remove most of your rubber seals before you soak everything in the ultrasonic cleaner, but for now, let's move on to the linkages. Yay! Now, for the linkages, keep in mind, that's a spring, that's a spring. Things are under tension, so you're going to want to release that tension carefully and not fling parts and carburetors all over your shop, your workbench, whatever. So I'm just going to pull that off of there. Now that's spun around 2 whole times in order for the right amount of tension. So that's another thing that you're going to want to pay attention to when you disassemble, because if you say you only spin that around once and clip that back in there, it's not going to have enough spring power to fully return your throttle, and you're going to end up with difficulty tuning and drivability issues. So pulled that spring off, did it by hand, didn't need a pick or anything special. That came off, and remember, it went around twice before it was seated in there. So we'll set that aside. There's a spring on the choke mechanism too, or sorry, it's not a choke here, it's an enrichment device. It is a cold start enrichment device. So we're going to take off this linkage nut here, and that is what hooks up to your linkage in the middle. The rebuild kit comes with these washers. They're special washers. They have little tabs on them so that they don't spin weird. Again, take pictures of this stuff. You want to know which way it's going to go back on. So grab your phone, use the camera. Look at me go, taking pictures. Making sure I document where the linkages are. It's great. Okay, so now we're going to try to we're going to pull this washer off first of all, because I don't want to fling it across my garage here. Now this is going to pull off of here, but it's also, you've got the spring and this whole plate that's holding it in. Alright, so what I ended up doing here is I grabbed the same pick that I used for the mixture screw, and I just reached it in here, hooked onto the spring, popped the spring down, and what that allowed me to do is, without worrying about all the tension that was on it, I was able to then pull this enrichment linkage plate off. We can pull the spring out. There's a washer and a seal. Things that come in the rebuild kit, and your enrichment thing for cold starts. 2 screws, that plate comes off, and that whole assembly will come out. So let's do that now. Now, I have heard that if the seals on this enrichment setting, or enrichment device, I'm just going to have to start calling it a choke, because it's too confusing to keep calling it an enrichment device. Alright, so I have heard that if these seals have perished in your enrichment device, it is possible that your carburetor will suck excess fuel in even when you're not when you don't have the enrichment device engaged, aka when your choke's not on. It's called a choke lever on the dash, people. Just call it what it is. Alright, so sorry. Again, that seal there, if perished, can definitely affect tuning. How this works is that there's excess fuel that gets pulled up into the carburetor under vacuum loads through these through the orifices here. So more things that need to be properly cleaned out, and as you engage and disengage the choke, there's a, I don't know if we can press this out to see it or not. I'll have to worry about that later. But there's a well, there, I can see it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. There's actually a crescent-shaped slot in that inside tube that lines up or doesn't line up with the hole, and the turning of that allows for fuel to be sucked up into the carburetor. I think post throttle plate, which is what, you know, makes it makes it an enrichment device, is that it, you know, when your throttle's still closed, it's still going to suck extra fuel up here, only when that slot is lined up with that little hole. So back to the linkage here, we got the enrichment all taken apart. We're going to back this nut off up here, or this. So I'm gonna try and keep this separated. I know that when it goes in the ultrasonic cleaner, it's all gonna get all mixed together anyway, but I'm trying to keep it so that this up here is all related to the enrichment. That's my mixture screw, and then so then down here we'll keep this all related to the throttle, and that way when we go to reassemble, if we've managed to keep it all straight, we will know what goes back on the linkages and where. So nut, toothed washer or little set washer, which, like I said, that comes in the rebuild kit. You get a couple of them. Spacer, and then throttle linkage in a couple of pieces here. We're gonna have to end up prying that off, but like I said, the more you can take apart here, the better you can clean it, and the better it will be when you go to reassemble it. So there we go, that's off. Now, depending on your rebuild kit, you may or you may not have gotten new throttle plates and shafts. The one that I bought actually came with new throttle shafts, and I believe new throttle bushings. I've got to pull the kit out to find out. We're going to pull this throttle plate off right here, and I'm probably going to drop something into the carburetor body, but we'll be all right. I need a smaller screwdriver, so we'll be back. All right, we have skipped ahead a bit, and there is some splaining to do. So PB Blaster is your friend. Get some of this and coat the screws through the throttle blade liberally and walk away. I got lunch, I came back, apparently still not enough time, because I ended up completely galling out one of the heads of the screws, had to drill it out. I'm bandaged. Like, it was a mess. So soak the thing in PB Blaster, come back, use a smaller size screwdriver, not something big that you'll rip it apart, that'll fit into the screw that goes through the throttle blade. So this is what you got here. It's a flathead, but you want to make sure that your screwdriver is no wider than that flathead, or it will not seat the whole way down in. So make sure you use a smaller screwdriver. Don't try to use mine screws had a little groove on the back side here. Don't try to use that. You'll just splay it apart and make it harder on yourself to get it out. Soak both sides of this in PB Blaster, go away, do something else, come back. I didn't listen to my own advice. I tried to get out too soon, ruined this screw, had to drill it out. Once you drill it out, you still can't get the throttle blade out. Smashing, bashing later. Finally, was able to get this throttle blade out. So this comes with your rebuild kit, or should. So this is a brass disc. It's consumable, for lack of a better term. So trash. Nice. Throttle shaft. Also, fortunately, comes in my kit because mine is now mutilated. So we're just gonna grab the one end of the throttle shaft, and we're just gonna go ahead and work it out. Throttle shaft out. Seal. Pay attention. This is a seal here. It comes in your kit, but mine's hard as a rock, so you will need to replace that seal. And Just want to inspect your throttle shaft, the bore for your throttle shaft. I am sure that somewhere there is some kind of way of measuring tolerances there to see if that is within some kind of spec, and making sure that it is whether or not it needs to be reamed out and have the new bushings pressed in. I would say just kind of feel it out. If there's a ton of play in your throttle shaft, I would plan on reaming it out and putting new bushings in. If there's not, don't worry about it. So there's just a couple other little things that we're going to pull off of here, not because they absolutely have to be pulled off, but because if you're disassembling it this far, you might as well. This right here, I'm going to get a smaller screwdriver so I don't repeat the same mistake as the throttle blade, but that's essentially just a guide for your piston. This groove right here on the piston indexes with this guide so that it tracks straight up and down, doesn't get all turned around, because there's certain things that line up certain ways. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research. This thing over here is a piston lifting pin. I guess it's this is if you, part of the way you adjust the mixture is you want to lift the piston ever so slightly. When you lift the piston, you're expecting certain things from your RPM, right? It's supposed to go up by 50 RPM and then start to die off. Who can hear that? Not me. I mean, we're talking John Twist levels of maniacal ability to be able to tell, hey, that was exactly 50 RPM and then it dropped. So I'm not worried about that. But if you didn't want to reach in there with a screwdriver, or you still had your air cleaners intact or whatever, and you still wanted to mess with it, this is a piston lifting device. So this will actually lift the piston, and you will be able to hear supposedly hear the 50 RPM raise and lower as you do that. So since it seems to be relatively easy, it's just this circlip on the back here, I'm going to go ahead and pull that apart. I'll get a smaller screwdriver, I'll take this out, and that is pretty much the carb body disassembled. Yes, could you do more? I'm sure that these brass pieces press out of here, but I don't have the tools with which to take them out. I don't have tools with which to press them back in, and honestly, as long as they're clean and free of obstruction, it's not something you really have to worry about. So let me get these last two pieces off. We'll come back to a stripped bare carburetor body, and then we will get to cleaning. Okay, so two extra things here. I went ahead and pulled the jet bore out. It just pulls straight out. There's a aluminum seal, for lack of a better term, that's in there. It's kind of press fit, so just gentle persuasion, don't yank the thing. I'll have to check and see if that aluminum seal comes in the kit, or if you're just going to have to stick it back in there. It's metal, it's not necessarily perishable. But so I pulled that out. This is now a completely disassembled, stripped down SU HIF 4 carburetor body. Because of all the mess that I made having to drill out the screw on the throttle blade, I am going to spray this thing out with carburetor cleaner before I stick it in the ultrasonic cleaner. One last level of disassembly to do. There is a screw, a set screw in the side here that will release your main jet needle to come out. There's two different types of needles, I believe. There's a spring-loaded one, which is clearly the mechanism that I have, and then there is also a solid one, and they're actually adjusted differently, and we'll get to that later if it, is helpful. But so I think this, once that set screw is out, I think it just comes out. Again, gentle persuasion. Depending on the kit, these actually, the main needles do not come in the kit. I got the official master rebuild kit from the company in the UK that everybody gets theirs from, and even with the pounds to dollars conversion, it's still $30 or $40 cheaper than buying it from any of the US based retailers. So, but that kit, no matter who you buy it from, does not come with these needles. For some reason, they're like 14 bucks a piece if you go to buy them elsewhere. So I chose the kit with no needles and had the throttle blades and throttle shafts, and now that I've just completely boogered that other throttle shaft up, I am glad I did. So I'm going to finish this disassembly and we'll move on to the ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, the Harbor Freight ultrasonic cleaner. One thing to note, if you're trying to use it to do SU carburetors, they're too tall. So I'm going to try and do it for one cycle and maybe flip it over and do it for another cycle so everything is submerged, but not quite large enough for the job I have for it. Oops.